Oh, hey BookTube, how's everyone doing? Oh, it's another week, another Tuesday, and that means more tags. I thought I'd do the PoetryTube Newbie Tag this week, just because I did the BookTube Newbie Tag last week. I thought this would be another way just to get to know me a bit more, get to know my reading taste a bit better maybe. And yeah, so I just thought I'd go for it. Yeah, this is the PoetryTube Newbie Tag, and it's created by Adrian at Stripped Cover Lit. And just before I jump into it as well, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's maybe commented on my videos in the last week or so since my PoetryTube Newbie Tag, my BookTube Newbie Tag, sorry. Yeah, just thanks for the welcome, for making me feel really included. It's been really nice. And yeah, I look forward to getting to know everyone a bit better. But yeah, thank you very much everyone, it's been really lovely. But yeah, I'll get into the tag now. It's 11 questions, we'll see how we do. My camera's been a bit funny today, so I might stop halfway through, so it doesn't, because it seems to stop recording randomly if I go on for too long. Anyway, number 1. Do you read and write poetry or just read it? Which I think what's getting at is that if you're saying you write poetry and you don't read poetry, then you must be doing something wrong. And I read and write poetry. Just here is the poetry shelf, and it's probably the most cramped shelf on the bookcase. And I don't know, it's kind of saying something really when a poetry book is about, it's quite thin. Yeah, and I've been writing poetry seriously for about, I don't know, 3-4 years. I think more like 4 years now, which isn't that long really in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, and I've been lucky enough to get a few things published over the last year or so really. I won't show you too much really because it's a bit awkward. This is just a little broadsheet that I think me and 5 other poets were included in recently, that a local publisher put out, which was quite cool. And that's some lines by me on the front. But yeah, I won't show you them all because it's a bit awkward. But if you'd be interested in me reading some of my poems, some of my published stuff, let me know. But yeah, I don't mind. Anyway. So the next question is, who is your favourite poet? Hard question, and I guess my answer might be a bit controversial. So my favourite poet is Ted Hughes, and for a lot of people maybe that might be, I don't know, a lot of people don't really like him for some pretty fair reasons, with Sylvia Plath, and yeah, just the train wreck that was their marriage, and yeah, how it all ended really. And yeah, I don't try to brush any of that under the carpet or anything, but yeah, I can't really get away from the fact that I really love his poetry, and he was one of the first poets I really connected with as well, and so it's kind of a sentimental choice as well in a way for me. But yeah, Ted Hughes is my favourite poet. And then, what question would you ask your favourite poet? Now, in reality, I would probably just be really shy and quiet, and would just be, really awkward and off somewhere else and not talk to them. Yeah, if I was to ask, and really be any poet that I knew and respected, I just want to know why they write and just hear their take on it. And there are probably plenty of interviews and stuff where you can find that as well, but just to hear it from their own lips as well. And yeah, it's just a question that fascinates me, and I love finding out why different writers and poets in particular feel like they need to write. Yeah, and then next is, what is your favourite poem? This is yeah, it's quite a hard question. It changes around a fair bit, and I think probably as time goes by, and I've read more, and I've reflected, and I see what kind of stays with me, I'll be able to answer it a bit better. But as things stand, I'd probably say that my favourite poem is The Ship of Death by D.H. Lawrence, which is, yeah, it's a bit of a weird poem, a bit dark, but it's a hopeful poem as well, I think, which is part of why I like it. And the way in which it's hopeful, I think, is a bit elusive, and whenever I think I have a grip on this poem, it kind of slips through my fingers a bit. So it's a continual fascination to me, this poem. I'll just read you a few of the lines at the beginning. I won't read the whole thing because it goes on a bit. The Ship of Death by D.H. Lawrence. Now it is autumn, and the falling fruits, and the long journey towards oblivion. The apples falling like great drops of dew, to bruise themselves and exit from themselves. And it's time to go, to bid farewell to one's own self, and find an exit from the fallen self. Have you built your ship of death? Oh, have you? Oh, build your ship of death, for you will need it. The grim forest is at hand, when the apples will fall thick, almost thunderous, on the hardened earth. And death is on the air like a smell of ashes, ah, can't you hear it? And in the bruised body the frightened soul finds itself shrinking, wincing from the cold that blows upon it through the orifices. Alright, yeah, that's a bit of The Ship of Death by D.H. Lawrence. And then next, what was it, question 5. What is your favourite poem to read aloud? I found this a bit easier to answer, and that's the first poem in this collection, Falling Awake by Alice Oswald. And the first poem in here is called A Short Story of Falling, and it's just these lovely rhyming couplets. If you can see there, it's probably got my scribbles all over it, and it's just really satisfying. It seems simple but kind of isn't. There's no punctuation, so whenever I read it out loud, I'm not sure if I'm actually reading it right, but yeah, I find it satisfying nonetheless. I'll read this one to you as well. A Short Story of Falling by Alice Oswald. It is the story of the falling rain, to turn into a leaf and fall again. It is the secret of a summer shower, to steal the light and hide it in a flower. And every flower a tiny tributary that from the ground flows green and momentary is one of water's wishes, and this tale hangs in a seed head smaller than my thumbnail. If only I, a passerby, could pass as clear as water through a plume of grass, to find the sunlight hidden at the tip, turning to seed, a kind of lifting rain drip. Then I might know, like water, how to balance the weight of hope against the light of patience. Water, which is so raw, so earthy strong, and lurks in cast iron tanks and leaks along, drawn under gravity towards my tongue, to cool and fill the pipe work of this song, which is the story of the falling rain that rises to the light and falls again. Right. Okay, and then the next after that is who's on your Mount Rushmore? No, Mount Rushmore of poets, of poetry. And for me, so I guess it's a kind of chance to just to include other poets that you love that are also other favourites. And so I thought I'd give 2 all-time favourite poets, and 2 poets that have just really impressed me recently. So the first up there would be William Shakespeare. I think if you're going to have a Mount Rushmore of poetry, you couldn't really not have Shakespeare on there, really. I don't think, at least. Everything I've read or seen that he's written blows me away. There's always something just beautiful and mesmerising in his writing. And yeah, where would poetry or drama or just literature be without Shakespeare? I mean, we'd still have it. It'd probably still be great, but it'd be different. And then the other kind of one of the all-time favourites I put up there would be Sylvia Plath. And again, I just think she's a wonderful poet, a really fascinating figure to me. But yeah, just a really fine poet, and I think she took it really seriously, and she worked hard, and the hard work, as far as I can tell, really delivered. Oh, sorry, I think I'm in a weird shadow or something, sorry, but yeah, so Sylvia Plath. And then I put two poets that I've read recently. Oh yeah, we'll see if they stay as favourites, but I put Anna Akhmatova up there, a Russian poet, who, I mean, she lived through the revolution, and through through the Soviet era. I think she just about outlived Stalin, and then just wrote some really great stuff as she lived through it all. Yeah, I'd recommend reading her selected her selected poems. It's really good. And then as well, John Clare, who's writing around the time of the just after the second wave of the Romantics. I think it's kind of included in with the Romantic poets, but he's sometimes, labelled as a like a rural poet, shepherd poet kind of thing, as this kind of crude, earthy kind of poet who's a bit different and a bit of a sideshow, which I think is unfair, and I think he's fabulous. He's really insightful, and yeah, quite deep and really direct as well. Yeah, I really love John Clare as well. I hadn't read much of him until earlier this year, but then yeah, he's just made a deep impression on me recently. And then, what's your favourite poetry collection? So I'll give you a couple of contenders first, because again, it's just one of those really hard questions for me. I mean, I could give you like 10, but yeah, I was tempted to go with this Alice Oswald collection, but really, there were some poems in here that really didn't blow me away. So as much as the poems in here that are good are amazing, but yeah, I couldn't bring myself to say this is a favourite collection really when I thought about it. But I also recently read this book. It's called Air Histories by Christopher Meredith, and for me this is a perfect collection. I read it in one sitting. The poems just feel wonderfully formed, just those kind of poems that you feel like couldn't be said in any other way. Sometimes it's a bit funny, sometimes it's peaceful and restful, and other times it's maybe a little darker. Yeah, but it's great. I'd recommend this. I'd recommend Alice Oswald as well. Yeah, both of these are great collections, but my favourite all-time collection would be Seamus Heaney's new selected poems. So 1966 to 87. And yeah, this would be a desert island book for me. He's just one of those poets who just really stands out, I think, in the last 100 years or so. 50 years or so. But yeah, I think he's an astounding poet, and particularly just this book with the first half of his career. Yeah, I could just read it over and over again. I really love it. Right, we're getting there. Question number 8 is rhyming. Talk about it. Yes? No? Not anymore? I'd say yeah, definitely. I think rhyme can be used really well, really interestingly, in contemporary poetry. I'd use the Alice Oswald poem that I just read out to you as one example. And in 20th century poetry, I mean, even though the trend in 20th century poetry was to go towards free verse and non-rhyming poetry, but there were some really great poets writing with rhyme in the 20th century. And one of my favourites for that would be Robert Lowell, and this is his collected poems. This is pretty much everything he's written. And if you were to read the first half of his career, you'd find some really great poems and some really great use of rhyme in them. It's quite subtle, very organic. I think it just kind of weaves through. It doesn't announce itself too much, which I think, yeah, if you're going to be using rhyme, you need to be using it in that kind of way. Really, you can't be too clunky in the way that I find like Philip Larkin and W.H. Auden to be sometimes. Although they can both be great sometimes, but yeah, I find them a bit clunky sometimes. And also Sylvia Plath is, I think, the way she uses rhyme is great. If you read Full Fathom 5 by her, that's some great, very subtle but masterful use of rhyme there. And then question 9 is, barring free verse, what is your favourite poetic form? And I'd probably say the poet? No, the sonnet. Sorry, yeah, I'd say the sonnet. Yeah, it's just one of those forms that for me, it's just the right size for me. It's not too long, but it's not so short that it just kind of feels off the cuff. I mean, I love a long poem, but for me, if you can get something into 14 lines and say it really well, and to say it complexly as well, because you know you have a turn at some point in it, Volta. So you're kind of showing a slightly different side, you know, a little twist. I think that's you know, maybe one of the best things you can do in a poem, if you can get it into that, you know, condensed down into that little space. But I mean, yeah, I love all kinds of forms, but the sonnet is probably my favourite. Robert Lowell, he went through a whole sonnet phase towards the end of his career, all blank sonnets, so no rhyming necessarily, but just using that 14-line space to work things through. And also there's a form called the sonnet crown, and there's a poem I'll link down called Poem Beginning and Ending with My Birth by Zena Hashem Beck, where the last line of every sonnet in this sequence will be repeated in the next sonnet, and you have 14 sonnets like that, and then the last sonnet, the 15th sonnet, is then made out of the first line of every sonnet in the sequence. And yeah, it just blows my mind that you can be so intricate with form, so meticulous. Yeah, I'll link that poem down as well. And then question number 10 is, humour in poetry or no? And again, I'd be up for humour in poetry. Yeah, I think it can be used really well, whether it's a little more wry or silly. There's some great poems here by Dario Jaramillo, I think is how you say it. He's got a whole sequence of poems about cats that are quietly funny, I would say. Yeah, they're great. I would look them up if you can find them in English. But yeah, but also I love a bit of you know, like Lewis Carroll, The Hunting of the Snark. Just a bit of nonsense. I don't mind my nonsense, or something a bit more ironic maybe, like Carl Sandburg's Limited. If you know that poem, it's just a little ironic punchline at the end. I'll read it out to you actually, because it's only a little poem. This is Limited by Carl Sandburg. I am riding on Limited Express, one of the crack trains of the nation, hurtling across the prairie into blue haze and dark air go 15 all-steel coaches holding 1,000 people. All the coaches shall be scrap and rust, and all the men and women laughing in the diners and sleepers shall pass to ashes. I ask a man in the smoker where he is going, and he answers, Omaha. So, there we go. That's some different takes on humour and poetry. Yeah, I think you can use humour. It's a great effect in poetry. And then 11. What elements do you think contribute to the best poetry? And I would say honesty. Not necessarily being. Yeah, I don't mean being kind of overly confessional in your subject matter, but just honesty in the sense of when you read the poem and you can just kind of tell that the words they've used to say it, and the form they've used if they're using form, and the subject matter, and the way these things weave together just couldn't be put in any other way. I think Coleridge had it right. He said that prose is the right words in the right order, and poetry. Prose is words in the right order, and poetry is the right words in the right order. There we go. And I'd probably agree with him there. And yeah, that's probably the best poetry. Just that honesty, and just letting the right words get into that right order. And I think it always comes across brilliantly when you work hard enough to let that come across, but don't overwork it, don't push it, and don't just just kind of scribble for 5 minutes and hope that people will see it. Yeah, it involves a lot of work, but I think it's worth it when it comes across. Yeah, so sorry if that made no sense at all, but there's my PoetryTube newbie tag. And I'm going to do the old cop-out and just tag everyone, just checking that everything's still going with my camera. Yeah, everything's all good. Yeah, I'm just going to go tag everyone. I know it's a cop-out, but it's an old tag, so what can you say? And yeah, so if you're curious about poetry, if you're interested in poetry and you haven't done the tag, well, consider yourself tagged. Yeah, go for it. And yeah, I think that's just about it. I'll try and link some poems, maybe some of the ones I read if I can find them or mentioned, and maybe some poems by the poets that I was talking about. If you're interested, and I'll link the original video as well. But in the meantime, I hope you're all doing well. Hope you're staying safe. Hope life's treating you okay. And yeah, I'll probably see you before too long. Alright, booktube, see you later. Bye bye.